Ignorance in the Buddhist sense isn't what you think. It's not like, oh, that guy needs to study more and fill up his head with more stuff. Ignorance is rather the mistaken idea of a separate self. The mistaken idea of a fixed identity, just what we've been talking about, with regard ourselves, but also with regard everything in the universe. That's what ignorance is in the Buddhist sense. It's one of the three poisons, but I don't want to bog you down too much right now with the Four Noble Truths of the three poisons. Let's do that. Let's put it. Greed, anger, and ignorance. My teacher used to say that ignorance was the granddaddy of them all, because it sets us up for a wrongful perception of the self. It sets us up for what the Buddhists would call a dualistic notion of the self. They're called the three poisons because all of the ills in our universe really stem from these things. The anger within us, the greed among us, the ignorance inside of us, this wrongful perception of a self that causes suffering within ourselves and among everyone we touch. See, the wrongful perception of the self is wrongful because it suggests that you don't understand, you don't correctly see. You don't correctly see that we are the cloud. It's not just that we're like the cloud, we are the cloud, dependent on everything. Everything and anything you can look at. The sun that makes our food grow. The water that nourishes the soil. The insects that pollinate and that circulate that soil, right? So we are the cloud. And we change every moment. You just don't see it until you get old. You don't see it, that you're changing, that everything you do changes you. You lie, you become a liar. Boom, your identity is totally transformed. You steal, you become a thief. Right now you're a student. Go home, maybe you're a son, or a daughter, or a mother, or a girlfriend. You're lots of things at once. I'm a woman, but I'm also a teacher. I'm also a student, like you all. It's the best role of all, let me assure you. We just don't see the fact that we've changed until much later. Those who haven't seen us for a long time, they see it, but we don't. You don't see yourself changing any more than you see yourself aging when you look in the mirror every morning. We are the cloud. And so ignorance is when we fail to perceive that interconnectedness. We instead get sucked up into this dualistic notion of the fixed self. And it puts us into a competitive mind frame where I've got to now protect this identity. And I look for praise. And I'm jealous when you get it and I don't. And I'm competing rather than cooperating. I'm against, it's me versus you. And this is my stuff besides, and don't touch it. And we're very antagonistic against each other because of this notion of the separate self. Right? There's a lot at stake, my reputation. Right? And we're not going to get the praise we seek, and we suffer, and we make everyone else suffer. And that was my spot, and you took it, and we're angry. And it leads to the insanity Buddhists call samsara. You want proof? Go drive down the freeway. And that need to protect leads us into this greedy tendency where we try to get as much as we can. We wrongfully think that it will guarantee our security, our survival, and more, that it will make us happy. But everything changes, and it never does. And so we keep looking, and we keep looking. You see, There is no you without the causes. The traditional way we think about the self is very dualistic, I think. Okay, the traditional way says, okay, this is me, this is my body. Like how we started a few minutes ago. We start by looking at the body. Okay, this is me. And the Zen masters can be kind of crude sometimes. They say, this old skin bag, right? Yes, inside this skin bag is me. And this is kind of like the barrier of me, right? And everything outside this skin bag is not me. And this is my space. Psychologists have even written about the space, that we need a 2-foot realm of space. So get out of you're in my space, right? Very protective about this thing we call ourselves. And everything inside is considered vital, our vital organs. What is that word vital? What is that word vital? What is life, Spanish speakers? Vida. And in Italian, la vita, la vie in French. Meaning everything inside of us is vital. That's why we call them our vital organs, our lungs, our liver, our kidneys, right? They're vital. They give us life. My life depends on those things that are inside my body. And so we go to great lengths to protect our body, ourselves, because it's the vehicle that carries ourselves, right? We took a deep breath together today. Take another deep breath. Take another deep breath. What did you inhale? Air, of course. Where did that air come from? Go for it. Tell me, where did the air come from? The atmosphere? Throw stuff out. What comes to your mind when you think of air? This life-giving stew of elements, oxygen. The trees?
Oh yeah, the trees.
Oh yeah, those, right? What would happen to my lungs without that air? They would just suffocate. And so that air is just as vital as my lungs, because the lungs don't exist without the air. And where does the air come from? We established that the trees have a lot to do with the air I breathe, right? And what about the trees? Where do they come from? The soil. I mean, don't overthink this, people. The soil. And what about the soil? Okay, you have water melting in the mountains and it nourishes the soil, and the rain comes and nourishes it further, and you have worms and they do their thing, and yes, and the biologists can help us understand how this organic matter works, and and we see that the air we breathe depends, there we go again, on all of these other things. We get to a point where we can't count these things anymore. And so the worms and the soil and the sunshine and the rain and the mountains are just as vital to me as my very own lungs. And so that dualistic notion of self, non-self breaks down, right? Remember what we did the first week of class? We looked at dualism. We looked at those supposedly opposite categories that stand apart. Man, woman, east, west, reason, emotion, right? What were some other ones? Man and animal, woman and man, and all of these opposing categories that face off against each other. And we try to find a victor at the expense of the other, right? But in these ancient wisdom traditions we study, we try to break down that wall of segregation and look instead, and that's what's meant by oneness or wholeness. We look instead on the mutual dependence of those parts. We are this web. We're part of the same web. And we depend for our existence on the same things. The Chinese say the same thing in the context of the yin and the yang. They're not diametrically opposing categories. They're mutually dependent, parts of a whole, constantly shifting, constantly moving in proportion, one giving rise to the other, and without one, the whole thing would fall flat. And so this notion of me and not me breaks down when I look deeply like that. Where do I draw the line now that I've established that the air is just as vital as my lungs? Should I draw it right here? Right here? Where can I draw the line? It becomes silly and absurd, right? And so I become very full and expansive. I'm floating, I'm everything. I am the trees. And so when I say we are the cloud, I'm not speaking in metaphor. That's emptiness. That's all emptiness is. Emptiness is interconnectedness. As Thich Nhat Hanh would say, we inter-are with everything. Interbeing. I'm interconnected with. The idea is that we suffer less with this understanding. We replace ignorance with wisdom. And it's easier to be compassionate when we've broken through those walls of segregation. When we've broken through the idea of a separate self. It's easier to be compassionate. It's easier to see that we're all part of the same web of existence. And we see the folly involved in hoarding this thing that I call mine, or even this thing that I call me. When I depend on everything you depend on, and we are part of the same suchness, we are one and the same in that sense. Are there any questions up to this point? I could take it a little further, but this is probably a good time to pause for questions. I'll let you know. I will tell you.